Natalie. Join me as I show you how to do this simple multi-holed square stitch bracelet featuring some holiday colors as we work with tiles, seed beads, and crystals. If you need any materials, go ahead and look below the video. In the description, we'll put a link there to get back to our website where you can see all the options for colors that you can do, clasps, etc. It'll be right there for you. Gather up your materials and your bead on it board and let's get ready to get started. So to get started on our square stitch bracelet here with multi-holes, it's very, very simple. I actually did this little design from our subscription box when Anna and I do the unboxings the Friday after the boxes go out on YouTube live. We play around with the beads that are in there, and this was an example, and I thought this would be great for holiday times. Many of you may have gotten a sample of these in your last subscription box for the treasure box, and let's make one out of some Christmas colors. So ended up switching some seed beads and some crystals, and we're gonna go forward with that. So the first thing you want is some thread. I'm using gray size 8 dragon thread, and I also have a size 10 beading needle. You're gonna use about 4.5 feet of thread depending on your wrist. This also makes a great anklet and a great choker, or a great stackable and a great stretchy bracelet too if you use thin stretch. So the way that we're gonna begin is leaving enough thread at the end of your stop bead, the bead that's going to stop the beads from falling off, to put on your clasp after the fact. We're going to begin with our first tile. The tiles have 2 holes. So we're going to put on tile number 1, and then we're going to create a pattern. Now this pattern can really be anything, it's up to you, but I'm going to do 2 11-ohs followed by 1 of my crystals, followed by 2 more 11-ohs. This happens at the top of the tile here. I'm going to add my next tile in line and let that drop down next to our stop bead. From here, we need to fill in that second row. So we're going to add 1 of our 11-oh seed beads and go back through the tile. Now, why am I adding that 1 11-oh? It's a pop of metal color. It also hides the thread and it just adds to the design. Do you need to do that? No, not at all. You can have the thread go right across to the other hole of the tile bead. You'll just see the thread a tiny bit exposed on it, but not much at all. You can see coming out of the tile then, I've added an additional set of my beads that go in the middle, 2 11s, 1 of my 2mm crystals, and 2 more 11s. We're going back through our first tile here. We're going to add our gold bead, since we didn't start with one. And we're gonna spin around just to get our gold bead on right here. After this, we don't have to do that section. We're gonna add our gold bead there, spinning around from the left-hand hole back to the right-hand hole of that one that we're coming out of. And then we're gonna go back through that same seed bead that we just added. And we are going to go down through the tile, down through the rows of our seed beads and our crystal, and our seed beads, and now we're getting ready to our repetitive pattern. So here we are coming out of the tile, and we have 1 11-oh right after it. We're going to add 1 2 11s, add our 2mm bicone, 2 more 11s, and then we're going to add our next tile bead. Once again, coming out of that tile, add 1 of your 11-oh seed beads in the gold. Go back through the other hole of the same tile and go ahead and pull tight because you don't want to see a lot of extra thread. 2 more 11s, 1 more crystal, 2 more 11s. You can also use a 15 there if you want. Go back through the last tile that you just added. Add another gold bead and then come down through that entire side. When we come down through the entire side, we're going through the 11-oh seed beads, the crystal, the 11-ohs after the crystal, and coming out again right through the tile. So that's all it is, repetitive over and over and over again. You pop in that 11-oh after you add your next tile. 2 beads, crystal, 2 beads. You can switch up the tile, you can do a number of different colors of them if you want to. You can grab more to the design, grab another tile, in goes. So I'll just do this one quick so you can see. Seed bead goes on, you're always going to end up with the one to the right of the project, or the direction that the project's going first. And then you're adding your second gold seed bead there after you come back and square stitch through the previous bead that you added, The seed beads are basically just an extension of that. Add your gold bead and come back down through the beads that you just added. Now, could you make the space between the seed beads or between the tiles shorter? Absolutely. Could you trade this out to super duos? Absolutely. Could you do round duos? Yep. Anything that has 2 holes will follow the same pattern. The only thing that you may get to in the issue with following that same pattern is if your beads are too big that they won't sit next to one another. Add a couple seed beads on the side to puff those beads out, and it's going to get more of that caterpillar look. You can certainly also make more rows to this if you want, just adding on your next row in that square stitch method. So if you would want to do another one, you add another bead through hole number 1. You go back through the bead that your thread is currently coming out of. That bead would sit right on there. There's an imperial bracelet that we have if you'd like to check that out. And here we go, we're right back in place to start our next row. So we'd add our seed beads, our crystal seed beads, our next tile, spin around that next tile and come on back. You can do them multi-layers, multi-rows. Whether or not you just want to do one, you can do that as well too, going in and creating and continuing with this square stitch, adding the little extra bead in when you're working with a multi-hole bead. When you reach your desired length of your project, you're going to want to add your clasp or your closure. To add your clasp or your closure, we're just going to come out and make a V basically. 2 seed beads go on. You have that gold one already there in between. You're going to add one of your crystals, and then you're going to sew through your clasp. But I'm using one of the Claspgarten clasps for that, so that loop is soldered. If the loop isn't soldered or you want the look even with the Claspgarten clasp, go ahead and grab a wire guard. After going through the loop, you want to go back down through the crystal that you added, add 2 more seed beads, and you're going back through your last tile. Here's your opportunity also as you go back through your last tile to add your last gold bead in place that sits right next to your tile bead. Go up through your seed beads, up through the crystal, and make sure that you're going through the loop again. Come down through the crystal, not going back through the loop because we want the thread to loop around that clasp, and then go down through the seed beads on the opposite side. You can do this up to 2 times, 3 times. I'm going to turn over and do the same thing on the opposite side. Remember, on the opposite side, we left ourselves enough thread to go back and do that after. Once it's completed, you're going to go underneath the bridge thread, which is going to be a thread that connects one bead to another. You're going to make a loop there. So I'm not actually sewing through anything, I'm just sewing underneath the thread. I'm going to sew through the loop that I've made once, and that's going to create a knot. And I'm going to sew through it twice, and that creates an even more stable knot. Pull nice and tight on your thread. It gets that knot right next to that area. Sew down through a couple beads. And here's where I'm going to burn off my thread end. So I'm going to take the thread here, burn it down flush next to the project. You can use green or gray thread for this. And now I'm going to flip over and I'm going to add it to the opposite side of the project as well. Once you finish off adding your other side of your clasp, which we just did the exact same way, doing that little V, I also usually do it where I have the clasps stay together, making sure that I'm not turning the bracelet in the middle to get the tongue to go in the clasp correctly. You can see how great of little stacker bracelets these are, and ways that you can wear these together, make them long, or even as a choker or an anklet. I can't wait to see everybody's different versions of these, whether or not you want to use super duos, storm duos, you can use round duos, round trios, disc duos, or maybe use a combination of all for this very simple project using just 11/0 seed beads, the tiles, and some 2mm crystals. Thanks so much for joining me in learning how to do this square stitch bracelet using the multi-holed beads. Again, it's going to be incredible to see everybody's versions because chances are you have something already in your possession from your stash that you can use to make this really, really simple design. If anybody wants to do multi-rows too, make sure to post your pictures in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and look below the video in the description to get links back to our site. Thanks so much for watching, Potomac Beaders, and stay tuned for more inspirational designs.